Look, it's giving me flashbacks of being a litigator and an associate at a law firm. When someone does a document dump, someone's got to go through all this stuff. But the question, of course, is why it took so long. And I want to begin by making it very clear about who had these documents. Who was the one to be delayed in turning these over?
Well, it's not Alvin Bragg's fault. If he didn't have them, he didn't have them. That being said, he did provide some back in June. Donald Trump didn't challenge that or say you weren't doing a diligent job to try to get if there's anything remaining. He provided them back in June of 2023. And now just in January, Donald Trump turns around and to subpoena this. So he's clearly waiting to delay. He had opportunities to do so, and he didn't push the feds, as I read and understand, to get the documents to him, whatever they may be. So this is not something within the control of the district attorney's office. This is something that's with control of the U.S. attorney's office.
I'm glad you made that distinction because I think it's lost on a lot of people. I think DA Alvin Bragg had tried to get them from the U.S. Attorney's Office. They didn't give them over. They had the opportunity to do so over, I think, a year ago. But why is there daylight? Explain to people about why this is not the same entity. Obviously, everyone knows that Alvin Bragg was prosecuting in an eye towards this very case. Surely the U.S. Attorney's Office knew that, but these are separate entities altogether.
Absolutely. They're incredibly distinct. And for example, if Donald Trump was convicted by a federal court, a district court, theoretically, he could turn around and get rid of the case himself and say, I'm all right. But he couldn't do that in his state. He couldn't be pardoned because of the state case. They're two totally different systems of government, just like your congressperson is not the same as your state senator. So it's vastly different. There's rules different in civil and criminal procedure. The statutes criminally are different. There may be some overlap in substance and in crime, but they're very distinct. And people need to understand that Alvin Bragg cannot tell the Southern District, give me X. You can subpoena them and try, or they can cooperate, but he can't really force them.
I wonder how much of their decision not to hand him over initially was a little bit of arrogance about how they viewed the Alvin Bragg case as opposed to their own assessment of whether to bring charges. I have to wonder, I know it's called the Sovereign District of New York at times, especially as it relates to the DA's office. But these documents, I mean, we're talking about 31,000 new documents and maybe even more are coming next week. What do you think might be in these documents?
Well, first of all, when you hear that number, someone who doesn't know any better, and I mean in a rude way, but someone may not be practicing law, 31,000 could be a lot. 31,000 could not necessarily be a lot. It's the substance that matters, what the context and content what matters. So very well, that could be information about witnesses who testified in the grand jury. It could be materials that were subpoenaed by the grand jury. It could be the grand jury minutes themselves that were provided. So there very well could be very important information. There could be exculpatory or just shed light and relevant information on Michael Cohen. And was that case prosecuted? Pardon me. Why wasn't the president prosecuted on these charges in the federal government in that system? So there's a lot of reasonable questions Donald Trump should ask. But delaying and villainizing is what his tactic is. It shouldn't have come to this point. And again, to your point before, it's not in the control of Donald ADA Bragg, and he's turning those materials over as quickly as he can.
And again, they could contain what's known as exculpatory material, which actually could help to prove that Trump did not do anything wrong. It could include inculpatory, which tends to show his guilt in these cases as well. It's really what's in these documents is going to be the rubber meeting the road. But the U.S. Attorney's Office, back to this point, unlike D.A. Bragg, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the federal office, they declined to bring charges against Trump back in 2018. So to what extent do you think that these documents could include some of the reasoning behind that? I mean, that thought process often ends up in these memorandums of why you decline to prosecute.
I think there's a certain argument to be made that they could be there, but to think that there's going to be a proverbial smoking gun for Donald Trump, that the feds have been sitting on all this time while giving DA Bragg some of it, I think is an overplaying of the hand. His attorneys have a responsibility to their client, period, and there should be no question that they have to advocate no matter the circumstance. But do I expect it's going to be something what we call Brady or exculpatory that'll say, you know what, this didn't happen and now he goes free? I don't expect that. And I don't expect the judge is going to dismiss this case either on some discovery technicality, because the prosecution in the state of New York is required to turn over that discovery if it's not even in their physical control, but if it's in the control of someone that they have the control over. And they don't have the control over the feds. So
really
I
important
think
point.
they're doing their job, but a little much.
And of course, the trial hasn't started. So it's not as if they're looking at this through the rearview mirror and saying, my goodness, what would I could have been able
Right.
to do with those documents? It does delay potentially from 30 days. The question is how much longer it will be. Jeremy, Saland, thank you so much.